Well, thank you for the presentation. It's never good to start correcting the one that preceded you, but I need to correct a little detail. I'm not the leader of that commission, I'm just the coordinator, because Father Eduardo is the president of the commission that is organizing and promoting the revision process of the statutes, which is the topic of my talk. Because as you've heard by now probably, you, the first and second degree members, are going to have the opportunity to review and revise the part of the statutes of Regnum Christi that deals with the life of the lay members. So the statutes, just to make sure we're on the same page, is the document that describes the identity, the spirituality, the mission, the way of life of the members of Regnum Christi, and that's what we're talking about. Now, odds are that if you are a normal member, which I suppose, that when you joined Regnum Christi, you didn't think twice about the statutes, whether they existed, and much less what they said. So you will be asking yourselves right now, why on earth am I supposed to care about statutes now? No? What's the big deal? Why all of a sudden am I supposed to care about the statutes, and what's wrong with the statutes we have now? So if you have these questions, this conference is for you. And it's made up of two parts. First is the purpose, why do we do all this? And second, the plan, how are we going to do it? So in short, the goal of this process is to draft an updated edition of the Statutes of Regnum Christi and present this draft to the Holy See for approval so as to express, protect and promote the charism of Regnum Christi. In order to do this, we need to address two issues that are very much connected, but we need to tackle them one at a time. First is the identity, mission and organization of the first and second degree of Regnum Christi. And this is what we're starting now. We expect to conclude with this on the Feast of Pentecost in 2016, when an international convention of lay representatives will draft an updated edition of the statutes, which will be then presented to the Holy See. And the second issue that's related to this whole process is what Father Eduardo was speaking about, the canonical configuration of the whole of the movement. What is the most appropriate juridical expression to foster communion in the mission that we share as members of first and second degree, consecrated women, consecrated men, and legionaries? And we will begin to address this after we finish the part of the first and second degree members. Now, as I already said, many people when they hear about that say, why should I care about statutes, and what do canon lawyers have to do with my life as a Regnum Christi member? And I understand that feeling. I personally lived happily and peacefully many years without worrying too much about juridical issues. And if I'm a little balder now than just a few years ago, it might have to do with canon law. But on a more serious note, to say that canon lawyers don't matter is like saying that the mechanic of the airplane doesn't matter. And it's true that you don't worry about him until there is a problem that needs to be fixed. And if the mechanic asks you for help, you will probably say, well, I don't know about airplane engines. But if he insists and says, well, the airplane won't take off if you don't help me, well, you'll start to give a hand. So over the centuries, the Church has built up a lot of experience about how to organize groups of people. And this experience is collected in the Code of Canon Law. When a group of people comes together to follow Christ in a specific way and asks the Church to recognize that way, to say that your way of sharing the faith and living it in the Church is valid, the Church does two things. It walks with that group to help them ask themselves questions that they themselves probably would not have thought of, but that the Church knows are of fundamental importance. And secondly, it helps these groups to anticipate and foresee errors that others have made in others, in the past. So in this way, the newly born group is enriched with the perennial wisdom of the Church. I think that's how we need to see canon law. It's not a series of bureaucratic hoops that you have to jump through. It's an opportunity to benefit from the Church's centuries of experience. And Regnum Christi is in a similar situation as these new groups. After an initial phase of rapid growth, we've run into several problems that have brought new questions to light and that the Church wants to help us to confront, because they want us to keep growing in maturity in our service to the Church. The Vatican, when they received the constitutions of the Legion and also the statutes of the associated, of the lay men and women, has said, okay, this all looks good, but you need to explain us better what Regnum Christi is as a whole. They've asked us to clarify canonically the nature of Regnum Christi, and that means especially the way the different branches interrelate. And to counsel us in this task, they have assigned Father Gianfranco Ghirlanda, a Jesuit priest, as pontifical advisor. Father Ghirlanda is one of the most respected canon lawyers in Rome. He was the dean of the Gregorian faculty for canon law for more than 9 years, and he's currently the advisor of 8 departments in the Vatican. But even more so than his credentials, I think what speaks for him is the fact that he's already been working with the delegate accompanying the Legion and the consecrated men and women of this since 2010, and so he knows us very well, knows and esteems very much the reality of Regnum Christi, and is more than willing to help us on this way. So the answer to the question, who cares about statutes, is the Church does. The Church does because she cares about us. She wants us to use all the means that we need to keep growing and maturing. The updated edition of the statutes approved by the Church will bring a number of benefits to the movement. The most important one is the one that statutes are made for. It will help us to give continuity to our identity, spirituality, and mission. Every one of us here found something in Regnum Christi. Found our Lord, or a deeper way of living with Him, found Christian friendships, found a mission, found maybe helps to form himself. So there's something there that needs to be preserved. No? In my case, what was it? No, what attracted me? What makes me stay here? What do I find in Regnum Christi? The Church is asking us to express clearly what it is about Regnum Christi that has enriched your life and the lives of those around you, the lives that you serve through as a member. By answering questions like this, you will be putting words to the gift that God has given all of us by offering us Regnum Christi as a gift and by entrusting us with the mission of the movement. And it is to express this gift better and to help preserve it and give it continuity in different cultures, times, and places that the Holy See is asking us to set out on this journey. And if you think about it, there are groups in the Church that have been enriching the Church's life for centuries. The Benedictines for 1,500 years. That's the idea, that God gives a gift to a group, and the group needs a way of expressing that, of living that makes it last through as long as God wants. Another benefit of an updated edition of the statutes is that it will allow any person whatsoever, inside or out, bishops, parish priests, people who just want to know, to have an objective reference point in the light of which to understand what the movement is. And finally, the updated edition of the statutes, together with the constitutions of the Legion and the statutes of the consecrated men and women, will provide the necessary clarity to build communion between us in our shared mission. Right now we're experimenting in new ways of working together, but we're still learning, and the statutes should be the expression of the lasting expression of how this working together in the mission should work. So you might be saying, okay, I understand that statutes are important, but we already have statutes. The Holy See approved them in 2004, and that approval still stands. So why this whole revision process? What's wrong with the statutes we have? And first of all, absolutely, that's a good comment. The Holy See approved the statutes of Regnum Christi, and that approval is standing. The Church recognized and is not putting into question the authenticity of the charism. Any changes or modifications to the statutes need to be approved by the Holy See. No, it's not just that we come together and come up with something and then can change that. Having said this, the problem is not in what the statutes say, but rather in what they don't say. There are some gaps that need to be filled in. Here are some examples. In these last 10 years since the approval in 2004, we've learned a lot, and the structures have developed. No? Father Eduardo gave the example, which is the most striking one, about the consecrated men and women having their own government. That's a new thing, and the statutes don't foresee that. They don't talk about that. Also, the Legion in the chapter expressed clearly that it considers itself part of the movement. This also needs to be reflected in an updated edition. Then, more about the first and second degree. If you remember, last year, the Cardinal de Paulis called a group of members from all over the world to Rome to start this reflection on the way of life of the lay members. And they took the part of the statutes that speaks about first and second degree and started reflecting, discerning, and they raised a list of issues about their life that they said we need to reflect more on this, but the 38 of us that are here together now in Rome are not competent enough. We don't feel representative enough to conclude this. So some examples of these questions. Now, how should a person be prepared for incorporation? What type of formation should a member receive? What commitments should a member have? And how do you understand the commitments? How strict are they? How should be the relationship between the sections? What's the purpose of the distinction between first and second degree? You know, many issues came up that the members themselves that were in Rome said, well, we want the whole movement to be able to reflect on those, and so we can really go deep in the answers. Another issue about which the current statutes say nothing at all is how the first and second degree members should participate in certain decisions, in decisions that affect their lives. In Regnum Christi, the leadership of lay people has always been valued very much. But the concrete way of living it out has depended on the goodwill, good sense of the people in charge at the moment. There's currently nothing in the statutes that offers parameters for this participation in decision-making by lay people. That's certainly not the most important issue. No? Much more important is the sanctification, the mission, but it's also a question that we will have to reflect on. Because if an institution wants to last through the centuries, it needs stable structures for the exercise of authority, and clear ones. A little while ago, a priest was telling me about an experience he had visiting a city where there's a sizable group of Regnum Christi members, but no legionaries, no consecrated at all present, and how they're kind of in a difficulty now because there's a couple that for many years with lots of love and dedication have been kind of directing the movement there, but there's others who don't have the same ideas, and now they're wondering, well, how should we decide who leads here? And normally you should go to the statutes, and the statutes should tell you, well, how do you fix that problem? No? But in our case, there's nothing about those kind of problems. But even in those places where there are legionaries and consecrated members, how should the first and second degree members participate, and in what questions? Because maybe not in all, but in some. right now it depends on the goodwill and sound decision making of the people in charge. Many excellent solutions have been found, but the statutes themselves don't say anything. So we need to kind of collect that experience and see what should be in the statutes and what should not. Another example of a topic that makes it necessary for the first and second degree to review their statute comes from a question that Father Ghirlanda made me when he looked at our plan for the process. He says, well, how do you know who's a member? And I said, well, the ones who've incorporated. Well, how do you know who's incorporated? No? Well, obviously you can know that, but so this is another issue that would need an answer. All these questions are not, they're rather technical, the examples I gave, and as I say, the other ones are much more important. What's the spirituality? How do you live communion in the movement? How do we sanctify ourselves? But also these more structural questions need an answer. So that's why we need to do this, the purpose. So now we could move on to the second part of how are we going to do it. We're dividing this process into four big stages. First stage is the first and second degree members' discernment. Second stage, the canonical groundwork by the Central Commission. Third stage, ratification of the proposed canonical configuration of the whole of Regnum Christi. And fourth stage, submission of this proposal to the Holy See. You will find all this on the website, so don't worry if you...
Page 9.
Oh, you already have it printed? Wow. I'm impressed. So in the first stage, you, the first and second degree members, will engage in a discernment regarding your identity, mission, and spirituality. What it means for you to belong to Regnum Christi, how you live the charism of the movement. This discernment will culminate on Pentecost 2016 with an international convention of lay members that will draft a proposal regarding the part of the statutes that pertains to you, to the lay members. This proposal will subsequently be submitted to the Holy See for approval. In the second stage, which we are calling canonical groundwork, the Central Commission will go, on the one hand, put the finishing touches on the proposal of the International Convention of the Labor Representatives. There might still be work to do on that from a technical, canonical point of view. And second, more importantly, elaborate the answer to the question that Father Eduardo was mentioning, about federation or not, and what kind of federation. To make a proposal or a series of proposals. That then, in the third stage, will be presented to the branches of the movement for reflection and ratification. Right now we don't know how this will be, because it depends on what kind of proposal is made and also what indications we might receive from the Holy See. We'll have to cross that bridge when we get there, but it's clear that whatever the Central Commission comes up with is just a proposal that will have to be legitimated by representatives of the branches. And then the fourth stage will be the approval process. Present that to the Holy See, and there's probably be a back and forth of questions and answers, like has been with our constitutions. So those are the four stages. And the first one, which is beginning now, is about the first and second degree. Now, about this first stage, you might say, well, why should we discern? Why make all the members discern about those questions? Wouldn't it be easier and maybe even more appropriate to have the general director come up with the answers? Or make a group of experts and just, answer those questions. But that wouldn't work. Because the question is, what does it mean to be a non-consecrated member of Regnum Christi? And the ones who live that, who've received that gift, need to answer the questions. We, the legionaries and consecrated men and women, simply can't answer for you. We can give ideas, we can share our experience, but it's not our vocation. St. Peter says in chapter 4, verse 10 of his first letter, as each one has received a gift, use it to serve one another as stewards of God's varied grace. Stewardship. I think we need to reflect on that concept. We're all learning to be better stewards of this gift for the church that is the charism of Regnum Christi. St. Peter says that each of us has received the gift of which we are stewards. The gift that I've received as a legionary is a way of living Regnum Christi, but it's different from the gift that you have received. And you have to be stewards of that grace. No? Certainly, and that's undeniable, no? That the legionaries and consecrated have played a decisive role in making the movement come to life, and probably always have to play a very, very important role as part of it also for the first and second degree. And so in that sense they're also stewards of that gift, but in a different way, no? Because it's not their own vocation. God has left this gift in your hands. No? You're responsible for it, not as owners, not as founders who can just do with it whatever they want, but as stewards called to make this gift thrive and endure. And we, the legionaries and consecrated, will certainly be there to help, to accompany you, just as you have been accompanying us these last years. So once again, a quick, well, I don't have to do all these reviews because you have it in printing. We have 4 large stages, the first dedicated to you. And now we'll give briefly the details of the first stage. The objective of this stage, of the first and second degree, is that the lay members do a discernment about their own way of living out the charism in order to submit a proposed revision of the statutes, of their part of the statutes, to the Holy See. And this will require an individual and also collective discernment about these topics. The first stage is also divided into 4 phases. The first phase of the first stage is not subdivided. So, be peaceful about that. So the first stage is study and reflection. Second phase, statute discussion and election of delegates. Third phase, Territorial Convention. Fourth phase, International Convention. In the first phase, the group study and reflection, from now until April 2015, you'll have the opportunity to familiarize yourselves with the teachings of the Church regarding the role of the laity in the Church. The idea here is that the studies you do in these months will help you to contribute maturely, responsibly, in the statute discussions that will follow in the second phase, which is called the statute discussion and the election of delegates. This will be the moment in which you will review the text of the existing statutes approved in 2004, addressing all those themes of the identity, mission, spirituality, what it means for you to belong to the movement, formation, the structures, organization, and so forth. To do that, you will have a working document prepared by us in the Central Commission that consists of mainly of the current statutes and also other documents from the history of the movement, former editions of the statutes, the manuals, etc. And also the questions that the 38 members, when they gathered in Rome, already identified as being the most pressing ones. And during that second phase, you will also elect in the localities delegates to be sent to the Territorial Convention. This phase will run from May 2015 to the end of the year. Then the third phase is the Territorial Convention, which will take place at the beginning of 2016. There, the delegates will draft written recommendations regarding the statutes that will be sent to the International Convention. And these recommendations will be made public once they're finalized. The convention will also elect delegates to the International Convention. There will also be legionaries and consecrated members participating in these conventions to share their experience with the work of the movement. But it's the topic, and also the main participants are the lay members. And then the fourth phase is the International Convention, which takes place around Pentecost of 2016. There the delegates will draft the proposal after this whole process of preparation, of praying, of reflecting, of finding a consensus. The proposal for the Holy See on behalf of all the first and second degree members in the world. All this information and much more can be found on the website of the revision process. So that's a summary of the steps that we will take from now until 2016, and then starts the second stage, after that. Now, just a quick thought about this whole thing about discernment. What does it mean that you will discern about these issues? Group discernment, I think there's another talk about it, so I don't go into detail, but being so important, I'll just say a few words. Group discernment is a way of seeking and discovering God's will as a group of people in the church. It's something that is done under the light of faith and guided by faith. Now, it's not a merely human process of finding majorities. We seek consensus together, but under the guidance of the Holy Spirit. It's about genuinely seeking the Lord's will and trusting that He will speak if we're open to His voice. That's what we've lived in the Legion, also the consecrated men and women these last years, and you can really see that it works. It's not easy, it's not something automatic, but the Holy Spirit uses these human means to make Himself present and to send His light. For it to work, it needs to be done in hand with the church and under the legitimate authority. In this case, it's Father Eduardo who invites us to do this, and that means it has the blessing from above. It takes the sincere desire to discover God's will and not just to defend my own ideas, my own convictions. It takes an attitude of listening to the others, humility about my own opinions, and trusting in the goodwill of the others even when they don't agree with me. And it's important that what God has done, what already exists and has borne fruit, be the starting point of that reflection. We're not starting from scratch. We're not reinventing ourselves. Cardinal de Paulus will always remind us of that. You need to look at what has grown, at what you've received, and from there see what God is asking you to take as a next step. And if we meet these conditions, then our discernment will bear fruit. Little by little, with God's help, the difficult questions find an answer, a consensus about what the right answer is. And finally, that consensus needs to be confirmed by the legitimate authority, in our case by the Holy See. Only do we know that this really is God's will for us once the Holy See says, okay, what you've come up with and what you present really is a good way of going about it. Now, to finish, just to share the two main concerns that I always hear when I speak about this to people, the objection that comes to mind, one that I always hear is that we've been navel-gazing already for too long, and that we should dedicate ourselves and all our effort to loving Christ and the mission. And this objection, which I've heard a lot, I love it. It's a beautiful objection, and it's wonderful to see that our people think like that and feel like that, that they don't want to worry about themselves but worry about the Christ and His beloved people. And to be quite honest, I've asked myself in these last weeks about myself. If all this time I have to put into this and meetings and writing documents and fighting about issues, if it's really worth it to dedicate so much time to this. Wouldn't I be using my time better serving the sick in a hospital or in a school with youth? And yeah, that was a kind of a little crisis I had there. And I took it to prayer. And the Lord, in a simple way, I think made me understand that it is worth it. He cares about the movement. And that's why it's worth it to walk this path, to dedicate also time to it. Because that's the next objection. But first about this priority of evangelizing and not be revolving around ourselves. I think the process itself, lived well, is an opportunity to evangelize and to be evangelized. Now, if we live it with faith, with charity, with humility, if we really go in there to meet our brothers and sisters in the movement and go deep about what God is asking of us, in itself, it's to be evangelized and to evangelize. And also, we need to be aware that we should not fall into paralysis out of analysis. That it should not take up all of our time and all of our energy. The other objection is that we don't have time for this. We just don't have the time. I have more important things to do. And since that's true, probably, that's why I gave you this talk, to try to convince you that it is important. In the hope that you will decide that it's worth dedicating time to this. Time for prayer and listening to the voice of the Lord, and time for discussing these topics, and time for participating in the different activities. I've noticed that, in the movement there's kind of two groups of people, so to speak, simplifying a lot. The ones who are happy with the way things are, and the ones who have proposals about things that should be done better. And normally the ones who are happy are the ones who think they don't have time for this, and the ones who have proposals to make find the time. So and both should, we need both, no? Because the ones who are happy have something we need to hear, and the ones who have proposals to make also have something we need to hear. So I invite all of you to take this decision to prayer and to ask the Lord what you should do. If Regnum Christi is something that you consider a relevant part of your life, and you believe that it's a gift for you and for others, then I'm sure you have something to give in this process. But if you really can't participate for time reasons, or you just don't feel called to it, that's okay as well. No? I mean, nobody has to participate. I just ask you to consider it, and certainly to do pray for those who will participate, so that the Lord will guide and bless our reflection. So, last summary, the goal of the process, of the whole process, the 4 stages, is to draft an updated edition of the Statutes of Regnum Christi and present this draft to the Holy See for approval, so as to protect, express, protect, and promote the charism of Regnum Christi. I won't go over the whole plan again. 4 stages, sorry. First of which is all about you. It has 4 phases, and that is starting right now. So we still have some time. I don't know if there are questions about this.
Yes, Father. Andrew Rowicki from Texas. During this first phase of study and reflection, I'd imagine there would be opportunities, maybe teams finding that the best time to do some of this reflection is when they're already, having encounters, maybe as a study circle. But it's also possible that perhaps some of those teams are meeting not only as Regnum Christi members, but also some folks that might at some time in the future discern that they're called to Regnum Christi. Do you think it would be appropriate for some of those meetings with Regnum Christi and non-Regnum Christi members to expose the whole groups to this material?
I think there will be a session with Carrie about the way you will live this in the States, and more concrete questions about the States. So just for the questions maybe to go more in general. Concretely about this, I think during the first phase, but that's just my personal opinion, that if somebody is really interested, and he could probably participate in that study phase. In the next phases, it's probably more convenient just for the members. No?
Sarah Blaylock from Edgerton, Ohio. Do you see a distinction as we proceed between the first degree and the second degree as we go forward? In the past, there's been a separation of sorts, but where I live, I don't know if there's an appropriateness. Do you see that coming?
I'm not a prophet, so that was one of the big issues when the 38 met in Rome. And first, if I remember well, there was a first reaction quite universal from different, that kind of putting into doubt the meaningfulness of the distinction. But then the next day, from all countries, people said, oh, we need to think about that again. We were too superficial yesterday. So, just to say that there is something that really needs to be prayed about and thought about, and what the meaning of this distinction is and how it should be lived, and I don't know the answer.
What I didn't hear in your explanation is anything about the problems with the founder. What I heard is the development of the statutes that exist. Is there a tie together? I know with the legionary renewal, was I would say there's a big tie together. But is what we're doing here for Regnum Christi taking what we have and just making it better? Or are we dealing with some special issues that are associated with the problems with the founder?
Not, how should I put it? I mean, I think that also when the 38 met, topics that are maybe not necessarily directly connected to the founder, but the weaknesses we might have had as a family, as a movement. Father Eduardo gave some examples now about the trying to impose things that have worked other places, or what Father Martin said about to exceed in zeal, or maybe pushing people too much, or things that are in our consciousness that we think we need to purify. Those things will certainly come up, no? But like structurally, or it's not an explicit topic, because the link is not so close. And I think also that the 3-4 past years have already have brought to light many of these issues more related to the negative aspects that we needed to kind of purify and become aware. And here, from my point of view, this is not so much in the focus anymore, because the question has kind of been clarified. But the process itself also will show what the concerns are. No? We're not dictating the problems that can or cannot be addressed. It will have to show.
I'm Alina Nichols from Cheyenne. I just have a question, and it may be just a practical matter, but the working document, will that consist of the statutes as they're currently written, or will it include other materials or guidance?
The working document will, the starting point for the discussion will be the current statutes, because they're approved, they're valid, and that's kind of the most objective thing to have as a common basis, no? But our task will be to select other material that's relevant to understand well the statutes, understand how in different topics have maybe developed over the years in the movement, and also to highlight the questions that have already been highlighted by the 38 and maybe show the first answers that they've given.
I appreciated what you said about the fact that you appreciated that we walked with you as Regnum Christi members, that you were the visible sign of what had happened in that humiliation. And as Regnum Christi members, we might have been more invisible, but we did stand. Maybe our knees shook at times as well, but we stood together. And I thank you for the humility of that statement that you said. It really, it's a bond that we all share. 2 questions. Since it's a renewal and we're looking at we keep talking of first and second degree, well, think about what Father Eduardo said, how the Legion, for a long time, it was the priests, and they were missing the feminine mystique of the beautiful consecrated women. And now that it's blended, we're getting a better picture. What about the men and women? You see that we have a greater percentage of women members. Do the men get the weighted, or do we weight their answers? That's the first question.
Do we weight their answers? Huh?
It's just that in the renewal, I heard of it was always charity, but in the renewal, we looked at it as charity and truth. And in one way, you described it as people happy or people with suggestions. And I think to myself, maybe it's different than that. Maybe it's that we have to be really charitable but honest. And that's what I've dictionary renewal, that they've had hard-hitting statements and sometimes probably very difficult sessions, but it's only the marriage of the two that will really get what God wants.
Yeah, about the second question, what I think that will be the biggest challenge is to learn to address these difficult, I mean, not most of these issues shouldn't be difficult in themselves, but since we all care about the movement, and if somebody makes a proposal that seems to me to be a danger for the movement, well, the passions come into play, no? So, and that's unavoidable. So to really learn to live, to be able to put the problems that I see on the table, and at the same time be very much aware that my opinion is so relative, and that maybe I'm very much influenced by my feelings or my personal experience, and that I'm not being objective, but at the same time maybe say what I have to say, and that the others also have the maturity to listen to that and to discern what, where this is coming from and how important it is. That will be very, very fruitful, I think, if we learn to live it well. And as you say, it's about living truth in charity and charity in truth. Truth said with charity might be uncomfortable, but it should never hurt. No? It should never be hurtful. And sometimes we're not capable of doing that because we're too weak. No? Sometimes we do say what we think is the truth, and we just don't manage to say it with charity. And that will also happen, because as Father Eduardo said, we're weak and fragile, but that's where we all need mercy and passion with one another. About the first question, we still need to develop the rules for the composition of the Territorial and International Convention. And we haven't thought about yet if you have a quota for young men, young women, women and men, or you just make it open. Whatever we do will be imperfect. No? Yeah. So there's no perfect solution here, probably. So I think I speak for all the legionaries and consecrated members here when I say, like Father Eduardo already did, to thank you and to express also that we, as consecrated members of the movement, we need you as well. No? We need you as brothers and sisters in following Christ and in the mission. I think that's one of the fruits also of this process, no? That we're much more aware, all of us, on our interdependence, on our complementarity, and we're very, very grateful for the way you've also accompanied us, for what you are. And I personally have much hope in this process. I think it will release even more the potential that is in the movement, and will all of us be better prepared to fulfill our mission once we're done with this whole statute thing. So thank you once again.
Thank you, Father. That was very helpful. One more quick detail before Mass. Anyone who's gluten intolerant, please present.